these small dots which you see here, all of these are the basis of the houses of Maya commoners. How did Maya commoners live? The majority of Maya commoner population in the pre-Hispanic period, 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, they lived very similar to the modern Maya in the Yucatan Peninsula in particular. The way they construct houses has not changed. Maya today still builds the houses as did their ancestors. The houses are built out of wood, of perishable material, and of wood and palm leaves. Sometimes they use grass, and all houses are built on small stone platforms to protect the houses from the rain during the tropical rainy season. Otherwise, the floor of the houses would be flooded in the rainy season between May and December every year. So today, Maya erect houses on these small platforms. And when Maya build houses, by the way, they don't talk about building a house, or they say I bind my house, because all the materials they use are natural materials. They don't use a single nail. The posts and the roof are bound together with how do you call it? With lianas, with vines. Yes, with vines, as you can see here. And these vines are soft when they are freshly cut, and when they get dry, then they contract, and they are hard as steel. It's a great way to build a house, and it's very inexpensive. But the disadvantage for archaeologists is we find very little of these houses after 100 years, or even less after 1,000 years or 2,000 years. What remains of these houses is just that. These are the poor remains of Maya houses, and you can imagine this is not very attractive. This has not been very attractive for archaeologists to excavate in the past. Archaeologists have focused very much on the palaces, on temples, because these buildings attracted large public and were of interest for the tourism industry. And nobody wanted to see house fundaments, house foundations. And LiDAR technology now allows us to see these house foundations, and has also stimulated now a new wave of archaeology dedicated in particular to studying the life ways of the farmers and the simple people. We know this is the reconstruction of an ancient Maya commoner house, very similar to what you see still today. In each of these houses, a family would have lived, probably 5 people. We calculated per house there were 5 people. Of course, Maya families were larger, so they built several houses around a courtyard, around a small patio, and so several members of the family, the entire family may have had 10, 15 people, and they were living in 3 houses or 4 houses around the central courtyard. Most of the daily activities took place not in the house itself, but in front of these houses. This is just another map of the place which we are excavating from my university in cooperation with Mexican archaeologists. And you see all of these small constructions here are house mounds, and the larger buildings here in white, these are stone pyramids and stone houses where the members of the nobility lived. It's not a densely packed city. We think that the average population in such a Maya city was about 800 people per square kilometer. 2,000 people per square kilometer in the city. In a city which is not very much, but on the other hand, on the countryside was densely packed and had a much larger population density than than the countryside in, let's say, in Europe at the same time. One of the big problems which Maya cities faced was the non-availability of water. Water was very scarce, which is strange because we are talking about a rainforest. But the Maya built their cities on the entire Yucatan Peninsula is basically a limestone plate. It's made of limestone, and during the rainy season, water evaporates and seeps in or through the limestone into the ground, and so there are no natural bodies of water. There are no lakes, no rivers, and the Maya had to construct artificial water collection basins, artificial reservoirs, which we call aguadas. And you see these two big square fields here. These are artificial water reservoirs, giant water reservoirs, which were built in order to provide the people of Ushul with water. And this is how we think this city, this ancient city may have looked like. You see, there was still a lot of vegetation. The Maya lived in a tropical environment. They didn't cut down the trees. They always, they had gardens within the city, even maize fields within the city, and still remains of forest, because the forest would provide shade, of course. Trees were used in all, fruits of the trees were used. Trees were used for medicinal purposes, fruits, of course, for food. But the basic diet, of course, of the Maya, of course, was maize. Maya farmers planted maize in combination with squash and beans. And these three fruits, these three crops provided all the nutritions, the basic nutritions which the Maya needed, sufficient amino acids for the body, and still today these three crops are planted by Maya farmers. So there's also a continuity in the way agriculture is done in the Maya world. Well, LiDAR also helped us to see that the Maya did not practice only slash and burn agriculture, as done in many parts of the tropics, where the forest is cut down, a field then is sown into the forest, and the forest soil actually is very poor. We always think of the tropics as abundant and rich vegetation, but we forget very often that the tropical soil is actually very poor soil, and therefore after 2 years of having a field in the forest, the soil does not have sufficient nutrition anymore to provide a good harvest. And therefore, people, when they plant in the forest, in the tropical forest, have to move their fields every 2 years. Which means if you practice this kind of slash and burn agriculture, you cannot maintain a large population. Now, with this new technology, this LiDAR technology, it shows us that the Maya world really, and in particular also the agricultural regions around the cities, were densely packed with people. Maya population density was much higher than we ever thought. This is a result of our recent research. We think that between 400 and 600 AD, the Maya world probably was the most densely populated region in the entire world. There is a recent science article where my colleagues propose that in this period of time, by approximately 600 AD, the total number of Maya that lived in the lowlands may have been between 11 million and 15 million people. An incredible population. But how could these people live in this forest? If slash and burn agriculture was practiced, well, they did not practice slash and burn agriculture. We see here on these LiDAR images that they had, that wherever it was possible, they constructed terraces, agricultural terraces. You see all of these lines here are agricultural terraces, and these permitted a much more intensive agriculture, a different use of water, the installation of hydraulic complex hydraulic system. The soil could be used in a totally different way as with traditional slash and burn agriculture. So Maya cities also had a different function, not just to keep population, and they were not just the places where kings lived, and kings, queens, and members of the royal court and artisans, but Maya cities were also places for ritual. The Maya cities, in fact, were stages, ritual stages, where kings could represent themselves as representants or many embodiments of deities. Temples were the stages for ritual dramas. People could watch rituals taking place on top of these pyramids. People would stand on the plazas and see what was going on the temples. You see here the reconstruction of Ushul, of the center of the Maya city of Ushul, with steep pyramids and large plazas in front of these pyramids. And the function of these public plazas was to assemble a large audience, and these people would then participate and watch when sacrificial rituals were taking place in these temples. And the Maya called their temples wits, which is a word for mountain. These were the temples were artificial mountains, and many of the Maya temples would represent sacred mountains and would be part of a sacred geography. And sometimes temple buildings were decorated with faces of gods, such as this temple entrance. And you will see, when you enter the exhibition, you will go through this door. This is the mouth. This door is shaped in form of the mouth of a Maya deity, the Maya mountain deity. I don't know whether you can see all the detail, but these are the teeth here, these are the eyes, and in the center here, but broken off and fallen, there was a huge nose sticking out here from over the door. And so temple facades were very often representing deities. Some of the temples, particularly during the pre-classic period, were enormous and erected over several layers, and very often even the different the sides of the pyramids were adorned with larger than life-size stucco masks. Stucco masks which represent the most important deities of the Maya pantheon. And this is a typical Maya temple from the early classic or the pre-classic period, from Cerros in Belize. And you can see the stairs leading onto the platform and huge masks, each mask representing a different deity. These masks were formed, and they were made out of stucco and were painted in bright colors, with red being the predominant color. And on top of this, there was a construction, a temple made out of wood and with a thatch roof. where the rituals for these deities then took place. More mask-adorned temples, just to give you an idea about the variety of Maya architecture. Temples were the places where Maya ceremonies and rituals took place, which included very often musicians making music with drums and trumpets and rattles. These ceremonies very often took place over a long period of time. They took place, we think that some of these ceremonies, which are described in hieroglyphic texts, took place for several days and were accompanied by music, by musicians, and dancers very often. These are beautiful paintings, which were already discovered in the 1940s in Bonampak in Mexico. And these paintings inside of one of these temples from Bonampak provide a deep insight into Maya life and into Maya rituals. Sometimes temples were painted in bright colors. This is not the original temple, this is a reconstruction of a temple which has been excavated in Copan in Honduras. But this is how you should think about Maya temples. They were not just stone, they didn't have these simple stone facades, but they were covered with stucco, and stucco was painted, and the entire iconography is related to the deities of the Maya world. Maya temples, the Maya very often constructed one temple building above the other. And therefore archaeologists, when we excavate Maya temple, we would excavate tunnels into these buildings. We would find one temple, and inside this temple another temple, and under this temple another temple. It's like an onion. And the deeper you excavate, the earlier it gets in chronology and in history. And most of these bigger temples, of these larger temples, actually contain burials of Maya kings. The large temples held burials of Maya kings. The smaller temples very often burials of nobles or of the founders of important families. And this is inside one of the temples from Copan, where archaeologists in the 1980s had found the burial of the founder of the dynasty of Copan. Temples for the Maya were places where kings were reborn. In Maya mythology, dead kings transformed into trees and into maize trees or cacao trees. Now you can see this a little bit here. You see the skeleton lying here on the ground, and out of the skeleton grows a tree, and the trunk of the tree is shaped in form of a human head with long, you see these long fingers here. These are the roots of the tree, and we know that this is a noble man from the king of a Maya city, and he becomes a cacao tree. The idea of the Maya is that kings are reborn either as maize plants or as cacao trees. The Maya architecture also had another aspect. Very often Maya buildings, whether they are temples or palaces, are oriented according to astronomical aspects. And this is a temple from Washington, and when you are on top of this temple and look, when you look east along this axis, along the side of this building, you would look at the place where sun rises on the where sun rises on the 21st of June. And On the side of this building, it would be sunrise on the 21st of December. So these are the solstices. And in front, in the sideline, when you look right behind this temple or over the central axis of the central temple, you would see the place where sun rises in the morning during the equinoxes, on 21st of March and 21st of September. And the Maya also had architecture to commemorate certain calendrical periods. Every 20 years, the kings of Tikal built such a platform with 2 temples, and in front of the northern temple, 9 stelae, 9 stone stelae, and to the east there would be a small enclosure with a stela inside, with an inscription carrying a date for the end of a 20-year period. These, what archaeologists call these constructions twin pyramid complexes, and you find them here. There's one here in Tikal, there's another one here in Tikal, there's another one here. So all over Tikal there are these twin pyramid complexes which were constructed to commemorate the end of 20-year periods. And a very important part of Maya, the Maya urban landscapes were palaces. Many of these constructions were places where actually the king lived with his family and with the royal court. The largest palace is probably the central acropolis of Tikal, which has hundreds of rooms. Here the king lived and received messengers, he received vessels. This was the place where politics were made. The palace of Palenque, how it looks today, and how it can be seen by visitors, and how we think it may have looked like in the past. Here is the palace of Palenque, and other constructions of Palenque temples which are built around the palace. Well, palaces were not only the places where the king lived, but also his entourage and the administrators, members of the royal court. We know this because we can read many of the hieroglyphs, which are titles for Sahal, for example. Sahal is a provincial governor. This title here, this glyph C, is Achon, librarian. This is Yahaukak, Lord of the Fire. He was responsible for maintaining the fires in the temples. Yahaute, Lord of the Trees. Maybe we don't understand this title very much, but probably the guardian of the lances and the arms. Yebet, messenger, and Bah Patan, he's a person who overlooks the tribute. All of these are members of the court who would be living in the palace, joining the king and helping the king with the administration. We even get insights into royal life from vase paintings, and we know that kings led a very luxurious life. They were drinking cacao, which was the champagne of the Maya, and they had dwarves, employees, they had guardians, musicians, and very close to Maya palaces we also find Maya ball courts. The Maya had a ball game. The ball game was very important in Maya both as a sport, but it was a sport with deep religious underpinnings. The ball game was played with a rubber ball, with a huge rubber ball, and the rubber ball was hit between 2 teams and could not be touched with hands. It was kept in the air just by the movement of the hips and the elbows and the knees. And because the rubber ball was very heavy, as you will also experience when you go through the exhibition, the rubber ball was very, very heavy. Ball players had to wear protective dress, leather belt and leather protection around the knees and the elbows. This is a Maya ball court. The ball game was played here by two teams, one team on this side and another team on the other side, and the ball had to fly back between, was exchanged between these two teams. We do not know how the Maya ball game was scored. Another aspect of Maya cities, of almost every larger Maya city, are stelae. On the public plazas, the Maya kings erected stone monuments, stone stelae, which are carved with images of the kings on the one side and hieroglyphic texts on the small sides. These hieroglyphic texts we have learned to read and to understand. The Maya left hieroglyphic inscriptions on almost every surface which they could work on, even on their own skin. We know that Mayas tattooed hieroglyphs on skin. They wore dress which was covered with glyphs. They painted ceramics and vases with hieroglyphs. And this is an altar, and this is how a Maya inscription looks like when it is drawn. And a hieroglyphic inscription painted on a wall. This is a beautiful mural painting recently discovered in the city of Calakmul. It's actually a market scene, and the people here are identified by short hieroglyphic captions. For example, this person here to the right, he is drinking something, and his name is, the two glyphs which we see here read Ach-ul. He is the one who drinks maize gruel, maize beverage. But maize gruel was the drink, let's say, of the more common people. Members of the nobility drank cacao from beautifully painted vessels. And these cylindrical vessels all were made as cacao containers, as drinking vessels for cacao. And we know this because there is an inscription